So it comes down to the question now. You know that you can go to college. You know that Massachusetts state schools do accept undocumented youth. You know that there are some private institutions, I'll give you guys some of them, that have and do still accept undocumented students. Now what do? The student is already a senior, you're working with senior students, some of them are going through the process right now of applying themselves, getting everything done. Some of them already have everything done in their hands and just ready to send out the applications. For those that are still filling out the applications, it's very important not to be afraid of stating your status in the application. That's actually very useful. But just keep in mind, not to tell the whole world your status, because not everybody out there is trying to help you out. That's a very sad reality. Okay? Not everybody cares about undocumented youth, and not everybody is really that about education for everybody. But it's not a problem to state on the application your status at all. It's actually better, because that way you won't have to have the headache of later expecting to see what the final result is all the way to the last minute, and you might lose the opportunity of accepting another university's acceptance letter. So definitely make sure that you fill out everything in the application as best as possible. Wherever it asks for a social security number, feel free to leave it blank. Colleges don't actually need a social security number. It is not required. It's useful, but it is not a requirement by all colleges. It's really not. A lot of colleges do ask for it still, and some colleges do require. If they have it as part of the policy, then it's required. But it is not a full necessity to have it in there. And if a student does have something called an ITIN, which is an individual tax identification number, you may feel free to put that in there as well, and note underneath it, not an SSS number, or just write ITIN. Simple. So that the school can understand that that student is not trying to forge something, that they're providing a legitimate number, but it's not a social security number. So leaving space blanks where you're asking for residency statuses or citizenship statuses is also pretty fine. You can also send a letter explaining why you left that blank along with the application. However, there are some applications that will ask other country of citizenship. Don't be afraid to fill that out either. One application that I really like is the Common App, because the Common App is really open-ended and it asks you to explain what your status is almost, if you really take a look at that citizenship section. Very useful college application for these students to be able to fill out. Also, like I said, if desired for you to send a letter, these colleges will not negate the letter. They might take a look at the letter, and it can potentially weigh in as a positive for you, especially if it's somebody of influence writing the letter along with the applications. And it's preferable, like I said, to fill out the Common App because it has the ability for you to explain your status a little bit better than the other applications have. And I stress this in the next slides. By no means falsifying information. Even if some students might say, you know what, I'm going to still do it anyways because I might get in-state tuition, it's my duty to advise not to falsify information because it may come back and bite you harder than you imagine. If the school finds out that you're falsifying information, they will take your ability to study in that school, they will remove you, and you're probably going to have a pretty difficult darn time going back to college. So even if you're legalized, you're still going to have a pretty difficult time. So I advise students not to do it. Now it comes up to the next question. You got the application done, you're ready to fill it out, you got all your recommendations set for the student, you have the midterm reports already set and ready to be sent, you got it all ready. Now let's talk about money, which is really where the question really comes down to. It's FAFSA. Can I fill out the FAFSA? Well, in the past, FAFSA used to allow undocumented students to fill it out, either leave the social security blank or put a tax ID number. What would happen in the past is that it would go through the system would not recognize it, reject it, and send a rejection letter to the student. So that student could go to the college afterwards and say, hey, listen, FAFSA told me that I can't get any aid whatsoever from the state or federal government. So here you go, I need some sort of financial aid. That's not what happens anymore. I've been in contact with FAFSA quite often to try to figure out what their new policies are. Pretty much, if anybody files a FAFSA form online, automatically rejects it if it doesn't have a social or if it doesn't have a valid number. So, what's the step that a student could do is file in a hard copy form that you'd have to call in FAFSA, and the student should ask for the form, because schools can only receive 3 forms per semester. So there's very few forms that you can receive at your high schools, but the students can ask for a form themselves, no matter what. Now, it's still somewhat interesting to fill it out, because you're going to get the form itself back, according to FAFSA. They're not going to send a rejection letter. They're not even going to put your application through the system. It's automatically going to get rejected if you put it through the system anyways, so they just send it back to you according to them. When they send it back to you, you can still potentially use that with the colleges and tell the colleges, listen, this student's FAFSA application doesn't even process because he doesn't have the right paperwork to process it. So it's often useful for you to ask the colleges if they have some other means of providing some sort of need of financial aid to that student, so they can prove to that college that they have a need for financial aid. Whenever you're doing all that, make sure they provide accurate value income estimates. It can be their tax returns, any IRS forms, anything that a parent or a student can potentially have from the government that says, this is this person's income. Now, if the parents and students are both undocumented, it applies exactly what I said. Mail in a hard copy of the form, get all that done, see with the college if they have any other option of proving that the student has a need of financial aid. Now, if only one is undocumented, if the son is undocumented or the daughter is undocumented but the parent is not, the parent can often attempt to apply on behalf of the student. I haven't seen anybody actually get that, so just keep that in mind. If you do actually see somebody, if you see some situation like this happening, and you do see a student that gets some financial aid, please let us know, because that's pretty major right there. That's something interesting in the system. It could be a potential loophole that we'd have to take a look into. If the student
is
undocumented and the parent is documented, it's weird because it does happen. It could be that the parent got married, but the student still hasn't the time yet to get their paperwork done, and he's already out of the range to be adopted by the father or the mother that is a U.S. citizen. It could happen. It's a very small percentage of time that it does happen, but it's a reality.
So you're saying if they get financially based on their parents'
Correct.
status?
Correct.
But they would still put their own status down?
It's interesting because I've heard of parents who apply for the FAFSA on behalf of their children. They usually get denied, but in case they were to get accepted, we need to know so that we can kind of figure out why they got accepted or how they got accepted, because they shouldn't be getting accepted technically. So yeah, because they do have the information in there in the long run. But if a student is a U.S. citizen, born here, and their parents are undocumented, fill out the FAFSA. He's a normal kid, quote unquote. We're all normal, but talking about the system as it is broken today, they see them as a normal U.S. citizen who is eligible for all benefits of being a U.S. citizen. It doesn't matter what his parents' status are. So you're definitely going to fill out the FAFSA for that one student, definitely fill out everything with all the paperwork that he or she has. One of the things to keep in mind also is the CSS profile. Does everybody know what the CSS profile is? Awesome. Very vital, because you might have some scholarships in there that don't require citizenship. It's not all the time, but you might find one or two in there that will not require U.S. citizenship. They are private scholarships, they're privately funded. It's something that definitely can be applied for. And again, by no means falsifying any information. And I mentioned about getting the FAFSA to file out a hard copy form. The way you do it, you just have to call them. The student has to call in, ask for a form to be mailed out. If they ask you why you want to mail out a form, I just want to mail out a form, I don't want to do it online. Simple enough. They don't really have to ask you for anything more than that, according to FAFSA. The next option comes in, and we know that you can't really... Oh.
Sorry, so students, undocumented students should fill out the CSS profile even if the school is not required?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely do it.
Absolutely. Okay.
Absolutely do it across the board for any undocumented student, any immigrant youth, or anybody.
So they should be filling out the FAFSA and the CSS?
FAFSA is really optional, because they're going to get the FAFSA back. So it almost doesn't necessarily make sense to fill out the FAFSA and go through the headache of it.
Unless their parent has citizenship, but they don't, in which case encourage the parent to apply on
Correct.
behalf.
Yeah.
Okay, but the CSS, they should
Definitely fill it
fill
out.
out?
Definitely fill it out. It's easy to do it. So you just go online and do it. It doesn't request for you to have a Social Security at the moment still. You can skip that part. So it's very useful to actually have that being done, even if the college doesn't actually